On the night of April 3, 1941, a gunshot echoed through the chambers of the Hungarian Prime Minister's residence. Pál Teleki had just taken his own life, not from military defeat, not from illness, but from something far more devastating: shame. His suicide note contained a single haunting confession. "We broke our word out of cowardice. We have allied ourselves with scoundrels." But what could drive a national leader to choose death over dishonor? The answer reveals something terrifying about the human condition: how the hunger to reclaim what we've lost can make us complicit in our own destruction. After World War I shattered the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Hungary was mutilated by the Treaty of Trianon, reduced to less than a third of its former territory. Millions of ethnic Hungarians suddenly found themselves living under foreign rule in Romania, Yugoslavia, and Czechoslovakia. The treaty didn't just redraw borders, it carved into the national psyche, leaving a wound that would fester for decades. In the 1920s and 30s, every Hungarian child grew up staring at maps showing the lost territories in black. The message was clear: we are incomplete, we are victims, and we must make ourselves whole again. This wasn't just nationalism, it was a collective obsession, a national trauma that politicians weaponized. Border revision became the cornerstone of Hungarian foreign policy. But there was a problem. Hungary was now a small country surrounded by larger, hostile neighbors backed by France. To reclaim what was lost, Hungary would need a powerful ally. That ally would be Nazi Germany, and as we know too well, making deals with monsters never ends the way we hope. At first, Hitler had little interest in Hungarian ambitions. He saw Budapest as a potential complication to his plans for Czechoslovakia. But by 1938, everything changed. After annexing Austria, Hitler needed Hungary's cooperation for his next move, and Hungary, desperate to reclaim its lost lands, saw an opportunity. Through German and Italian arbitration, Hungary regained southern Slovakia in the First Vienna Award, nearly 12,000 square kilometers without firing a shot. Then, when Hitler dismantled Czechoslovakia entirely, Hungary seized Carpathian Ukraine, crushing the short-lived republic that had declared independence there. For Hungary's leaders, this must have felt like vindication. They were rewriting the humiliation of Trianon piece by piece. But there was a price. Each recovered territory came with a moral compromise. Each victory bound them tighter to Berlin's orbit. Prime Minister Pál Teleki understood this danger. He pursued what he called a policy of armed neutrality, trying to regain territory while avoiding full entanglement in Hitler's wars. When Germany invaded Poland in 1939, Teleki refused to participate and instead opened Hungary's borders to over 100,000 Polish refugees. For a moment, it seemed possible to walk this tightrope, to benefit from German power without becoming Germany's puppet. But empires don't offer partnership. They offer only two roles: master or servant. In 1940, the Soviet Union seized Romanian territory and Hitler brokered another deal, the Second Vienna Award. Hungary gained northern Transylvania, 43,000 square kilometers. To secure this prize, Hungary signed the tripartite pact with Germany, Italy, and Japan. The trap was closing. In March 1941, Yugoslavia signed the same pact, joining the Axis. But 2 days later, a military coup overthrew the Yugoslav government. The new regime rejected Hitler's alliance. Hitler was furious. He ordered the immediate invasion of Yugoslavia, and he demanded that Hungary participate. This was the moment, the choice that would define everything. Teleki knew what this meant. Hungary had just signed a treaty of eternal friendship with Yugoslavia. To invade would be to shatter that promise, to confirm that Hungary had become exactly what he feared, a vassal state that traded honor for territory. On the night of April 3rd, Pál Teleki wrote his suicide note and pulled the trigger. His death changed nothing. The invasion proceeded. Hungarian troops crossed the border, meeting little resistance from the collapsing Yugoslav army. Hungary reclaimed Vojvodina, the Bachka region, and more. But something had been lost that could never be recovered: the illusion that Hungary was in control of its own destiny. The territories Hungary occupied were immediately subjected to brutal ethnic policies. Serbs, Jews, Roma, and others faced systematic discrimination, forced labor, and expulsion. In January 1942, Hungarian forces conducted the Novi Sad massacre, killing approximately 3,500 civilians in raids that shocked even some German officials. And then came the ultimate test, Operation Barbarossa. When Germany invaded the Soviet Union in June 1941, Hungary initially hesitated. But after a mysterious bombing, Soviet planes allegedly attacked the Hungarian city of Kassa, though to this day no one knows why. Hungary declared war on the USSR. Hungary's Second Army, over 200,000 men, marched into Russia. They fought alongside the Germans in the summer offensive of 1942, pushing towards Stalingrad. Hungarian and Romanian units had to be separated by an Italian division to prevent them from fighting each other. Old hatreds die hard, even in the middle of someone else's war. But the Hungarian troops were poorly equipped, lacking adequate armor, artillery, and winter clothing. As the German offensive stalled at Stalingrad, Hungarian units found themselves stretched thin across hundreds of kilometers of front line, sometimes with only a single platoon defending an entire sector. Soviet Marshal Georgy Zhukov observed coldly, "Compared with the Germans, the troops of these satellites were not so well armed, less experienced, and less efficient even in defense." In January 1943, the Soviet counteroffensive smashed through the Don River defenses. The Hungarian Second Army disintegrated. Soldiers were ordered to stand and fight to the death, but most were overrun or captured. Of the 200,000 men who marched into Russia, 143,000 became casualties. The Second Army ceased to exist. By 1944, Hungary's leaders knew the war was lost. Regent Miklos Horthy began secret peace negotiations with the Soviets, but Berlin was watching. On March 19, 1944, German forces crossed into Hungary in Operation Margaret. There was no real resistance. Some Hungarian units didn't even realize they were being occupied. Germany now controlled Hungary directly. The consequences were immediate and horrific. In May 1944, the deportations to Auschwitz began. Under Nazi oversight and with Hungarian collaboration, hundreds of thousands of Hungarian Jews were transported to their deaths. Horthy tried to stop it, arranging an armistice with the Soviets. In response, the Germans launched Operation Panzerfaust. Horthy was seized by the SS and forced to appoint Ferenc Szalasi, leader of the fascist Arrow Cross Party, as prime minister. Under Szalasi, the nightmare intensified. Jews were rounded up from the Budapest ghetto, lined up along the Danube River, and shot so their bodies would fall into the water. Thousands more were marched toward Austria in death marches as the Soviet Red Army closed in. By October 1944, Hungary had become a battlefield. Soviet forces pushed through Romania, which had switched sides, and advanced toward Budapest. In late December, the city was surrounded. Hitler declared Budapest a fortress city to be defended to the last man. Nearly 33,000 German and 37,000 Hungarian soldiers, along with over 800,000 civilians, were trapped inside. For 102 days, the siege ground on. The Soviets advanced block by block through Pest, then crossed the Danube into Buda. German relief attempts failed, supplies ran out, the dead couldn't be buried, a nauseating stench of decay hung over the city. On February 11, 1945, ignoring Hitler's orders, the garrison commander ordered a breakout. That night, 30,000 men tried to fight their way out of the encirclement. fewer than 700 made it. Within days, Budapest fell. The siege was over. The city lay in ruins, half of all buildings destroyed, essential services collapsed, tens of thousands of civilians dead. Among them were approximately 15,000 Jews murdered by arrow-cross militias, even as the Red Army closed in. Hungary had fought for territory. It had allied with scoundrels. It had compromised its honor piece by piece, telling itself that each concession was necessary, that each recovered province justified the cost, and in the end it lost everything. There's a line from Nietzsche that captures the arc of this tragedy perfectly. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. Hungary began with a legitimate grievance. The Treaty of Trianon was harsh, perhaps unjust. But the pursuit of historical justice became an obsession, and that obsession made Hungary vulnerable to manipulation. Each recovered territory felt like vindication, but each one also required deeper compromise with Nazi Germany. The tragedy isn't that Hungary was weak. The tragedy is that Hungary's leaders convinced themselves they could control the devil's bargain, that they could take what Germany offered without becoming what Germany was. Paul Teleki's suicide was a moment of moral clarity in a fog of rationalization. He saw what Hungary was becoming and chose death over complicity. But his death didn't stop the machine. The invasion of Yugoslavia proceeded. The march into Russia continued. The deportations to Auschwitz happened anyway, because once you've made the first compromise, the second becomes easier, and the third, and the 100th. By the time you realize you've become the thing you once opposed, it's too late to turn back. The siege of Budapest lasted 102 days. But Hungary's siege, the siege of its own conscience, lasted far longer. It began the moment leaders decided that territory was worth more than principle, that national pride justified alliance with evil. And here's the unsettling truth. This pattern repeats throughout history, in every culture, in every era. We see injustice done to us and we become obsessed with reversing it. We tell ourselves that our cause is righteous, so our methods don't matter. We make alliances we know are dangerous, telling ourselves we're smart enough to control them. But the monsters always win, not because they're stronger, but because once you start thinking like them, once you decide that the ends justify any means, you've already lost. So the next time you see a nation, a movement, or even yourself justifying moral compromise for a greater good, remember Budapest. Remember Paul Teleki's final words, "We have allied ourselves with scoundrels," because the fortress that falls most catastrophically isn't made of stone. It's the one we build inside ourselves, the walls we construct to keep out the truth about what we've become. And once those walls fall, no relief force is coming.